Hello, everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss types of introductions and basically how to write the introduction section of your research paper. So, let's look at how introductions can differ depending on the research approach that you've selected for your study, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. Each approach has its own unique way of setting up the study to make the most sense for the readers. For quantitative research, the introduction is often very structured and objective. This approach focuses on testing theories or relationships between variables, as we have discussed in previous videos. If you were researching the effects of advertising on consumer spending, for example, your introduction might mention recent statistics on spending patterns and explain why examining this relationship matters. The goal here is to set up a clear, testable hypothesis. You might say, for instance, that the study tests the hypothesis that social media advertising significantly increases spending among Filipino millennials. The quantitative introduction here is about giving readers a clear path to what is going to be tested in the paper. On the other hand, qualitative research introductions are typically more flexible and they are also descriptive. They often focus on exploring a phenomena in depth. So imagine you're doing a qualitative study on the experiences of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs adjusting to life back home. Your introduction might begin with a story or quote from an OFW, capturing a personal insight from them. This approach is about understanding individual experiences. So the introduction often reflects also this focus. It might read something like this study explores the challenges and perspectives of OFWs reintegrating into Filipino society after years of work abroad. By framing the study this way, you help readers see the personal side of the issue. Finally, mixed methods introductions combine elements of both. Mixed methods research includes both quantitative and qualitative aspects, allowing for a comprehensive look at complex issues. For example, if you're studying digital literacy among college students in the Philippines, you might use surveys to measure digital skills quantitatively and interviews to get deeper insights into students' learning experiences. Your introduction might highlight both the numerical gap in digital skills and personal accounts of students who struggle to keep up. This approach provides a broader perspective and it addresses the what and the why in your study. A helpful model for structuring a research introduction is the deficiencies model. This model is especially useful because it guides you in addressing the gaps or deficiencies in existing research, and thus you make it clear why your study is necessary. The first part of this model is stating the research problem. So, this is where you outline the specific issue your study will focus on. Let's say you're focusing on the challenges of mental health support for Filipino university students. You might start with a statement that reads like, while mental health issues among university students are rising, many Filipino institutions lack adequate support systems. This identifies a specific problem outrightly and sets the focus for your study. Next, you will want to review evidence from existing literature. This means summarizing what past studies have found related to your topic and help frame them or using them to frame your research within the larger field. To do this, you might cite studies showing that mental health support improves academic performance and well being. By doing so, you show that your study is not isolated, it's part of the ongoing conversation about mental health and education. After that, you'll indicate deficiencies in the evidence. Here, you point out what's missing or underexplored in current research. For example, you might highlight that while there are studies on mental health in Western universities, there's limited research focused on Filipino students. And this shows readers that your study is filling an important gap. Finally, you should explain the importance of the problem for the readers or the audiences. This is where you show why your research matters, not just academically, but practically. You might explain that understanding these challenges could help universities develop better mental health programs, benefiting thousands of students in the long run. This model guides readers from problem to purpose, and it makes a strong case for why your study is relevant and that it is needed. A good introduction should clearly present the research problem, use a narrative hook to capture interest, and also including relevant literature while addressing the gap your study will fill. So, again, to clearly present the research problem and be able to adequately capture readers' interest early on, you can use a narrative hook. So, what is a narrative hook? Now, let's say you're studying the impact of social media on Filipino teenagers' mental health. To start, you can use a hook, which is something that catches attention right away. For example, like a real life case scenario. So, an example of this would be last year, a study reported that over 70% of Filipino teens are active on social media. But along with connectivity comes a rising trend of anxiety and depression. So, you see, presenting this hook not only engages readers, but also introduces the issue in a relatable and very intriguing way. After this, you would state the research problem directly, such as despite increased use of social media, there is limited understanding of its effect on Filipino adolescents' mental health. This statement makes it clear why the study is needed. Next, you would include evidence from the literature. You might mention studies from other countries linking social media use to mental health concerns, noting that while similar trends exist worldwide, specific data for the Philippines is scarce. This review of literature gives context and it helps readers see the gap. Lastly, you might point out the importance of audiences, such as educators, parents, and policymakers, explaining how understanding this issue could lead to better mental health resources for teens. By putting all these components together in a coherent way, your introduction not only presents the topic, but also makes a persuasive case for why your study matters. After introducing your research problem, you'll want to justify it with evidence from existing literature. This part here is like building a foundation. You show that your study is rooted in and supported by past research. Without this, readers might question the validity of your topic or the merit of why we need to read up about it. And they might even wonder if it's been sufficiently studied already. For example, if your research problem is about climate change impacts on Filipino farmers, you could cite studies showing how climate change affects crop yields and weather patterns. Maybe one study found that typhoon frequency is rising and that damages crops regularly. Another study might highlight the challenges farmers face in adapting to these changes. By presenting these findings from different studies, you're showing readers that climate change is indeed a real and documented issue affecting Filipino agriculture. So, this study that you are presenting thus strongly supports now the need for your study. It's also essential to choose credible sources for this section, such as published journal articles, government reports, or studies from reputable organizations. Now, each source should relate directly to your research problem. giving your readers a reason to trust that this problem is real and worth investigating. Now, in our climate change example, if you pull information from reputable climate studies in Asia, readers will view your work as credible and relevant. Through these citations, you create a narrative that backs up your research problem, making it clear that your study is not only relevant, but also part of a broader field of inquiry. This justification adds weight to your introduction, helping readers understand that your study is needed and that it is timely. Once you've presented the existing literature, the next step is to point out the gaps or deficiencies in that evidence. This part is crucial because it shows readers exactly why your study is needed. And it's not enough to simply say that other research exists, right? You need to explain what's missing in the other published literature on the topic and how your research fills the gap that you have identified. Let's go back to our example on climate change and how it impacts Filipino farmers. So, suppose past studies have focused primarily on large scale agricultural operations, and it overlooked the unique challenges faced by small holder or family owned farms. This is a deficiency because smallholder farmers make up a significant portion of the agricultural sector in the Philippines, and they're highly vulnerable to climate change. Pointing out this gap tells readers why your study on smallholder farmers is important, not just for academic purposes, but for practical reasons as well, especially when you clearly present the case of how these smallholder or family owned farms are, when put collectively, have a significant economic impact on the economic landscape in the Philippines, in the Philippine agriculture. Another type of deficiency could be a lack of regional focus. For example, studies on mental health and social media, they often center on Western populations, which may not fully apply to Filipino teens, of course, given the cultural differences. By identifying this limitation, you emphasize that your study will offer new insights tailored to a specific context, such as the Philippines or Asia more broadly. Addressing deficiencies in the literature also strengthens your credibility as a researcher. It shows that you've done your homework, that you have critically examined existing studies and found areas that need further exploration. For readers, this builds trust, and so they get to see that your study is not redundant or unnecessary, but it is actually filling an essential knowledge gap. In summary, this step is about showing readers what's missing and how your study addresses that. A strong explanation of deficiencies gives your introduction depth and it justifies the time and effort that will go into your research, making it clear that your findings will add valuable new information to the field. After discussing the deficiencies in existing research, it's important to highlight why your study matters to a specific audience. Now, this part connects your research to real world applications, showing readers that your study is not just a theoretical exercise, but something that they can have, but something that can have meaningful impact as well. To demonstrate, let's return to the example of studying mental health and social media among Filipino teens. Now, different audiences would find this information valuable for different reasons, obviously. For example, teachers might use your findings to understand how social media influences students' mental well being and adjust school programs or counseling services accordingly. Meanwhile, parents could learn about potential signs of mental distress linked to social media use and feel better equipped to support their children. Another key audience could be policymakers. Suppose your study finds that excessive social media use is linked to high anxiety levels among teens. So, this finding might prompt policymakers to consider regulations on social media advertising targeting young people or, uh, yeah. young teenagers, young adults. And this can prompt policymakers to initiate public awareness campaigns. In this way, the importance of your study reaches beyond the academic community and speaks to larger societal concerns. Relating the importance of your research to specific audiences not only makes the study more compelling, but also demonstrates its relevance. Think of this as the so what moment for your readers, right? By the end of this section, they should clearly understand why the research matters and how the findings could be used. Just as when you would ask, so what? So what now that we have this topic? So what now that we have this gap? By answering the so what question, you will be able to specifically tell what it is that you can gain in benefit or the valuable knowledge that you can pick up from reading this paper or conducting this research. This connection to practical application makes your study resonate more deeply and increases its potential impact.